I was a creature of the night, fueled by caffeine and an insatiable curiosity for the internet's darkest corners. My name is Alex, and at 22, I mostly lived in the glow of my monitor. I had a perpetually messy bedhead, wore thick-rimmed glasses, and favored oversized hoodies that swallowed my lanky frame. My room was a typical student's den, empty energy drink cans, a mountain of books, and wires snaking across the floor like digital vines. I considered myself an experienced explorer of the deep web, having ventured past the usual forums and markets, but nothing had prepared me for the day I found the invitation. It wasn't something you stumbled upon by accident. It was a link buried deep within a forgotten paste bin, referenced in a cryptic message on a long-dead forum about internet lore. The message simply read, "They say it's just a myth. Prove them wrong. Link." My pulse quickened. The Red Room, a legendary deep web service where live torture and murder were supposedly streamed for paying clients. Most dismissed it as an urban legend, a boogeyman story to scare new users. But a part of me, the part that craved the thrill of the forbidden, always wondered. The link led to a page so minimalistic it was unsettling. A stark black background, a single line of white text. "Welcome. Your invitation has been noted." Below it, a countdown timer ticking down to an unknown event, and a single input field. No graphics, no flashy banners, just an oppressive emptiness. I stared at it, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was real, or at least a very convincing simulation of real. I closed the tab, needing a moment to process the sheer audacity of it. My fingers trembled slightly as I picked up my cold coffee. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake it. The countdown timer, always present in the back of my mind. I researched obsessively, digging into every obscure corner of the web for information on red rooms. Most sources were dismissive, filled with warnings and anecdotes of elaborate scams. But a few, chillingly, spoke of people who claimed to have seen them, or at least almost seen them. They described highly secure networks, invite-only access, and payment in untraceable cryptocurrencies. The common thread was a psychological toll, a sense of having glimpsed something profoundly evil. A week later, the curiosity finally overwhelmed the dread. I reopened the link. The countdown had advanced significantly. The input field was still there, now with a small flashing cursor. I didn't know what it wanted. A password? A crypto address? I felt a wave of cold fear wash over me. What if entering anything here meant acknowledging something I couldn't unacknowledge? What if it was a trap? What if it wasn't a scam? I remembered a Reddit thread, long archived, where a user claimed to have found an old Red Room invitation. He said the input field was for a sacrifice, not a physical one, but a piece of personal information so intimate, so vulnerable, that offering it felt like a violation. He didn't elaborate on what he'd entered, only that he regretted it deeply. My mind raced. What information would be considered such a sacrifice? My full name? My address? My deepest fear? I sat there, paralyzed for what felt like hours. My apartment was quiet, save for the hum of my PC and the frantic beat of my own heart. The glow of the screen reflected in my glasses, making my eyes look like wide, frightened pools. I felt a profound sense of isolation, as if I was the only person in the world who knew about this link, this timer, this chilling possibility. Then, a new line of text appeared below the input field, slowly, character by character. The price of admission is truth. Truth? That was even more ambiguous. My true identity? My true desires? My darkest secret? I scrolled down on the page, something I hadn't thought to do before, and found another line of tiny, almost imperceptible text at the very bottom. "We know you. We've always known you." My blood ran cold. I immediately unplugged my internet cable, then my entire computer. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped the power strip. It wasn't the threat of seeing something horrific that terrified me most in that moment. It was the chilling implication that they had been watching me. The invitation hadn't been random, it had been targeted. I spent the next few days in a daze, barely sleeping, jumping at every shadow. I formatted my hard drive, changed all my passwords, even considered throwing my computer away. But the damage was done. The seed of paranoia had been planted. I never went back to the link. I never found out what happened when the timer reached 0. But the memory of that simple black screen, the ticking clock, and those 5 chilling words, "We know you, we've always known you," remains etched into my mind. I still wonder what truth they wanted, and what truth they already knew. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if the countdown ever truly stopped for me.
I was 28, a freelance graphic designer named Mark. My hair was usually a mess. I had a short beard I constantly stroked when I was thinking, and I often forgot to shave. Most of my days were spent hunched over my laptop, fueled by cheap coffee and an endless scroll through obscure corners of the internet. One rainy Tuesday night, bored and procrastinating, I stumbled upon a link on a forgotten forum. It was labeled The Oracle, and the description simply said, "Know your fate." Naturally, my cynical curiosity was piqued. The website itself was unsettlingly simple. A plain black background, white text, and a single input field. No flashy animations, no ads, just a quiet, almost ancient feel to it. It asked for a username. I typed in Mark D, my usual handle. The page flickered, and then a new block of text appeared. It wasn't a generic horoscope or a vague fortune cookie message. It was a precise, chillingly specific prediction. Your left headlight will fail on Thursday. You will spill hot coffee on your favorite shirt on Friday morning. Your sister, Emily, will call with surprising news on Saturday. I scoffed. Coincidences. This was clearly just a numbers game or cleverly designed social engineering. I closed the tab and forgot about it, at least until Thursday evening when I was driving home from a client meeting. A cop pulled me over. "Sir, your left headlight is out." My blood ran cold. The next morning, pouring myself a fresh cup of coffee, my hand slipped. The hot liquid splashed across my chest, staining my favorite band t-shirt. The shirt I'd worn yesterday, the one I loved. A tremor went down my spine. This was unnerving. On Saturday, my phone rang. It was Emily. "Mark, you won't believe this," she began. "I'm pregnant." She was ecstatic, and I feigned excitement, but my mind was elsewhere. The Oracle. Every prediction had come true, down to the minutiae. Panic began to set in. I revisited the website, my hands clammy. I typed in Mark D again. This time, the predictions were darker, more personal. "You will receive an email from an old friend, Sarah, on Tuesday, reminiscing about a forgotten memory. You will feel a sharp pain in your knee on Wednesday while climbing stairs. On Friday, you will find a strange key in your jacket pocket that you don't recognize." I immediately called Sarah. She sounded surprised to hear from me. We chatted for a bit, but I couldn't bring myself to ask about the email. I deleted the site from my browser history, convinced it was messing with my head. I avoided stairs on Wednesday, taking the elevator everywhere. But as I stepped out, my knee gave a sudden, excruciating twinge. I almost crumpled. And sure enough, on Friday, rummaging through an old jacket I hadn't worn in months, there it was. A small, tarnished silver key, completely unfamiliar. The fear was no longer a chill. It was a constant, icy grip on my chest. I felt exposed, watched. I couldn't shake the feeling that something knew me intimately, something that shouldn't. I stopped sleeping well, plagued by nightmares of a faceless entity watching my every move. I deleted social media, unplugged my webcam, tried to vanish from the digital sphere. But the Oracle wasn't a product of my public life. It seemed to know the private, unshared details. 2 weeks later, fueled by a terrifying mix of dread and morbid fascination, I typed my username into the Oracle again. The page loaded slowly, each pixel a nail in my coffin. This time, the predictions were different. They weren't about mundane events. You will cease to exist on October 17th. It will be quiet. You will be alone. October 17th was 3 weeks away. My blood ran cold, then roared in my ears. I stumbled back from my desk, knocking over my coffee mug. The liquid spilled, but I didn't care. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a game. This was my death sentence. I tried to rationalize it. It had to be a psychological trick, a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I knew when I was going to die, wouldn't I subconsciously manifest it? I decided to fight it. I called my family, arranged to visit friends, booked a short trip for October 17th. I wouldn't be alone. I wouldn't let it be quiet. I wouldn't let it happen. The days crawled by, each one a countdown. I was a wreck. I stopped working, barely ate. My friends noticed, my family worried. I told them I was sick, burnt out. The paranoia was eating me alive. I checked every lock, looked over my shoulder constantly. I felt a suffocating pressure, like a noose tightening around my neck, even though I knew the date was still days away. On the evening of October 16th, I was at my friend Sarah's apartment. She had insisted I stayed with her, concerned by my worsening condition. I felt a strange sense of calm, a defiant relief. I had made it. I was surrounded by people, safe. The oracle was wrong. I woke up the next morning, October 17th, with the sun streaming through Sarah's window. I was still alive. A weak smile touched my lips. The dread began to recede. I stretched, my muscles stiff from the tension of the past weeks. Sarah was still asleep in the other room. I crept out of bed, careful not to wake her, and headed to the kitchen to get a glass of water. As I reached the hallway, I noticed something glinting on the floor by the front door. A small, tarnished silver key, the one I'd found in my old jacket pocket weeks ago. How had it gotten here? I picked it up, confusion replacing my relief. It was precisely 7 a.m. Sarah's apartment, being an old building, was prone to drafts, and the front door, though seemingly closed, wasn't quite latched. A narrow, almost imperceptible gap yawned open. I remembered the oracle's last prediction. You will cease to exist on October 17th. It will be quiet. You will be alone. I was alone in the hallway. Sarah was still asleep. And then I understood. The predictions weren't about my death, but about my existence. The strange key, the open door. It was a setup, not by some supernatural force, but by something human. Someone who had been watching, observing, planning. The moment the realization hit me, a muffled sound came from behind the slightly ajar door. A quiet click. The air grew cold. My blood froze. I stood there, key in hand, paralyzed not by fear of an unknown future, but by the terrifying certainty of the present. The oracle wasn't predicting my death. It was simply outlining the steps leading to my disappearance. And the last step had just been triggered. I didn't move. I couldn't. The quiet of the apartment became deafening, waiting for whatever came next.
My name is David, a name I've since tried to shed like an old skin. I was a man of 35, an accountant with a receding hairline and a perpetually worried frown. I was meticulously organized in my work, but my personal finances had become a chaotic disaster. A series of bad investments and a crippling gambling addiction had left me swimming in debt. One rainy evening, while drowning my sorrows in cheap whiskey and desperate online searches for quick money solutions, I stumbled upon a deep web forum. It promised discreet, effective debt collection services with a dark twist. The forum was unsettling, with cryptic usernames and veiled language. I found a thread titled "Unburden Yourself," where users shared stories of their financial woes, and replies offered solutions. One user, with the handle Silent Hand, claimed to offer a service. For a fee, he would recover debts from unwilling payers. The implication was clear: violence, intimidation, or worse. In my desperation, my moral compass had spun wildly off course. I reasoned that if someone owed me money and wouldn't pay, I was just collecting what was mine. I messaged Silent Hand. His response was immediate, surprisingly professional, and chillingly precise. He asked for the amount, the debtor's details, and a small upfront fee in untraceable cryptocurrency. He stated his services were guaranteed.
My heart pounded as I provided the details of a former business partner, a man named Robert, who owed me a substantial sum and had vanished. I sent the Bitcoin, a sum that represented my last real hope of digging myself out of the hole. Days turned into a week, no word from Silent Hand, no news of Robert. I began to worry, then to regret. Had I truly sunk to this? Hiring someone from the deep web to threaten or harm an old friend, even one who had wronged me? The guilt was a heavy weight. I tried to contact Silent again, asking for an update or to cancel the service. No reply. Then, a week later, an email arrived. It wasn't from Silent Hand, but from an unknown address, encrypted. My hands shook as I opened it. It contained a single, grainy photo. It was a picture of Robert, looking terrified, bruised, tied to a chair. Below it, a message: debt collected, fee due. And then another amount, far larger than my original payment, with a new cryptocurrency address. My blood ran cold. This wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want him hurt, just the money. I replied frantically, explaining my mistake, begging them to stop. The response was immediate and concise. You engaged our services. You owe us for the service rendered and for the expedited collection. The debt is now yours. Pay or we collect from you. A new photo arrived a few hours later. It was a picture of my apartment building, my street, my front door. The angle was slightly off, as if taken from a car or a discrete distance. The message was explicit. We know where you live. We know your family. We know your habits. The collection process has begun. Pay or forfeit. Terror gripped me. I hadn't just hired a hitman, I'd become the target. This was a common deep web scam, I belatedly realized. Hitmen for hire services were almost universally frauds, designed to extort money from desperate people like me. I was trapped in my own twisted web. I spent the next few days in a living nightmare. Every shadow seemed to hold a watcher. Every unfamiliar car parked on my street sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My mind raced, trying to find a way out. I was an accountant. I understood numbers, but this was a threat beyond calculation. I called the police, but what could I tell them? That I'd tried to hire a deep web debt collector and was now being extorted? I'd implicate myself. More emails arrived, each one escalating the threat. They sent pictures of my favorite coffee shop, the park where I sometimes jogged, even a photo of my elderly mother's house from down the street. They detailed my routines, my schedule. They mentioned my gambling debts, my financial woes, information I'd only shared with a handful of people or buried deep in my own private files. They knew everything. The final email came late one night. It contained a picture of a man, bound and gagged, his face bruised and swollen. It wasn't Robert. It was me. A crudely photoshopped image, but terrifyingly convincing. The message was simple: last chance. The timer expires at midnight. I collapsed at my desk, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't pay. I had nothing left. I just wanted it to end. Midnight came and went. I was still alive. Nothing happened. The next morning, no new emails arrived. The silence was deafening, almost more terrifying than the threats. It felt like a predator lying in wait, just beyond the edge of my perception. Robert called me a few days later, completely oblivious, asking for his money back from an old unrelated deal. He was fine. He hadn't been threatened, hadn't been touched. He was just living his life, unaware of the nightmare I had dragged him into and out of. I was left with the crushing weight of my actions, the lingering paranoia, and the chilling knowledge of how easily I could have been caught in a trap of my own making. I never heard from Silent Hand or his accomplices again, but the experience fundamentally changed me. I cleaned up my life, paid off my legitimate debts, and never ventured into the deep web again. But sometimes, late at night, a car idling too long outside my window, or a strange face in a crowd can still send a cold dread through my heart. The fear might have been a scam, but the consequences and the scars were very real.
I was Liam, a 25-year-old criminology student, trying to make a name for myself by delving into the murky world of cybercrime. I had neat, short hair, wore glasses, and always carried a worn, leather-bound notebook for my observations. My focus was on the deep web's illicit markets, specifically human trafficking. Most of my research was theoretical, but one day I stumbled upon something far more visceral, far more terrifying than anything I'd anticipated: a black market for human organs. It began on a heavily encrypted forum, hidden deep within a network of proxies. The entry requirements were strict, requiring complex authentication and a referral from an existing member, which I faked using a burner account and some clever social engineering. The forum was cloaked in layers of euphemism. Donors were referred to as providers and recipients as clients. Prices were listed in various cryptocurrencies, fluctuating with demand and urgency. I watched, horrified, as posts detailed packages, kidneys, livers, even hearts, complete with blood types, tissue matches, and alleged health statuses of the donors. The language was clinical, detached, like ordering a car part. It stripped away all humanity. One post, in particular, caught my eye. It was an urgent request for a kidney, blood type O negative, for a VIP client. The price offered was astronomical. I dug deeper, following encrypted links within the forum. These led to an even more obscure section, a kind of internal marketplace. Here, communication was less veiled. There were mentions of logistics, transport, and recovery teams. The chilling implication was that these organs weren't coming from willing, legal donors. They were being harvested. One thread contained a grainy, pixelated photograph. It showed a darkened room, clinical-looking equipment, and what appeared to be a gurney. On it, a blurred figure. The caption read, "New batch prepped, quality assured." My stomach lurched. This wasn't some elaborate fiction or a sick joke. This felt sickeningly real. The cold professionalism, the lack of remorse, the stark utilitarianism of it all. It was the purest form of evil I had ever encountered. I spent weeks meticulously documenting everything, downloading screenshots, encrypting them, and making notes. I traced connections, IP addresses where I could, though most led to dead ends or highly secured servers. I noticed recurring names, or rather, handles, that appeared in multiple threads. Intermediaries, brokers, surgeons, and recovery specialists. They spoke with a horrifying nonchalance about human lives. The most disturbing discovery came when I found a discussion about procurement methods. One user, in what seemed like an attempt to boast or educate, detailed how they targeted vulnerable populations: undocumented immigrants, homeless individuals, people from impoverished regions who could be lured with false promises of work or a better life. The user casually mentioned pre-screening for viability and minimizing collateral damage, clinical terms for assessing a human being's suitability for organ harvesting and disposing of any unwanted byproducts. My hands trembled as I read. This wasn't theoretical criminology anymore. This was a direct window into unimaginable human suffering. The air in my small apartment felt heavy, suffocating. I felt a profound sense of helplessness, knowing that somewhere people were being brutalized, exploited, and ultimately sacrificed for the greed of others. The climax of my research came when I found a post discussing a package due to be delivered to a client in a major European city within a week. The details were specific enough: a particular hospital, a time window, and an estimated arrival. It was a potential lead, a concrete event that might be stopped. My mind raced. Could I report this? To whom? How could I prove it was real without revealing my own illicit deep web activities? I was just a student, not a law enforcement officer. I copied the information, my heart pounding. I drafted an anonymous email to several international crime agencies, providing as many details as I dared, careful not to reveal my identity or how I'd obtained the information. I cited an anonymous tip from a concerned citizen observing dark web activity. I attached some of the less incriminating screenshots, hoping they would be enough to spur an investigation. After sending the email, I disconnected from the deep web, wiped my temporary virtual machines, and tried to scrub my digital footprints. The relief was immense, but short-lived. I kept thinking about the providers, the clients, and the chilling coldness of the entire operation. I never heard back from any of the agencies, never saw any news reports about a foiled organ trafficking plot. The silence was deafening. The memory of those forums, the detached language, the grainy photos, still haunts me. It wasn't the explicit violence that was most terrifying, but the casual, bureaucratic way human lives were reduced to commodities. I often wonder if my anonymous tip made any difference. I wonder if the package was delivered. I wonder how many people have fallen prey to this unseen, unspeakable trade. The deep web, I learned, isn't just about drugs and stolen data. It's a place where the darkest aspects of human depravity are meticulously organized, bought, and sold with chilling efficiency. And once you've seen it, you can never unsee it.
My name is Chloe, and I was 21, a graphic design student living in a small, cozy apartment. I had long, dark hair I often tied in a messy bun, a preference for oversized sweaters, and an almost obsessive need to curate my online persona. My Instagram was a vibrant gallery of my life. Art projects, brunch with friends, scenic park visits. I was meticulous about privacy settings, or so I thought. This story is about how my digital footprint became a hunting ground and my world shrank to the size of a screen. It began subtly, a direct message on Instagram from an unknown user, account name observer_17. The message was simple: nice sunset pic today. I'd posted a sunset photo a few hours prior. I blocked the user, dismissing it as a random creep. But a few days later, a similar message arrived, this time on my Tumblr from a different username. That cafe latte looked good. I felt a shiver of unease. My Tumblr wasn't linked to my Instagram, and the cafe post was from weeks ago. Then came the emails. They were addressed to an email account I rarely used, one that wasn't publicly linked to any of my social media. The subject lines were mundane, but the content was chillingly specific. Having trouble with your Adobe Illustrator project? Don't forget that purple gradient technique you like. My current project involved a very specific purple gradient. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just random, this was targeted. Someone was watching me in a way that felt impossibly intimate. I immediately went into damage control. I changed all my passwords, activated two-factor authentication, and ran countless antivirus scans. I tried to trace the emails, but they were routed through anonymous servers, bouncing through a labyrinth of IPs. I felt a growing sense of panic. A week later, the terror escalated. I received an email with an attachment. It was a photo of me, sitting at my desk, working on my laptop, exactly as I was when I received the email. My hair was tied up, my favorite blue sweater on. The angle was slightly elevated, as if taken from outside my window or through a hidden camera inside my apartment. The light was dim, consistent with my desk lamp. There was no way this photo could have been taken by anyone but someone physically present. I screamed, a strangled sound that caught in my throat. I tore through my apartment, searching every nook and cranny for hidden cameras. I checked smoke detectors, outlets, even the tiny pinholes in my lamps. Nothing. My apartment was small, and I lived alone. The idea that someone had been inside or was watching me from outside without my knowledge was horrifying. The messages continued, now explicitly referencing my daily life. You left your keys on the counter again. Hope you enjoyed that late night snack. Don't forget to lock your door when you leave for class. Each message was accompanied by a photo taken from seemingly impossible angles, always showing me in my private moments. The stalker wasn't just online, they were in my physical proximity. I became a prisoner in my own home. I drew my blinds permanently, taped over my webcam, unplugged everything I could. I slept with a knife under my pillow, jumping at every creak and shadow. The vibrant, confident Chloe of Instagram was gone, replaced by a terrified, paranoid shell. I felt utterly alone, isolated by a fear I couldn't explain without sounding insane. How could I tell anyone that someone was sending me photos of myself taken inside my apartment? One evening, I received another email. The subject line was simply, "I'm outside." I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. I slowly, carefully, crept to my living room window, pulling back a tiny sliver of the blind. The streetlights cast long, dancing shadows. There was no one directly visible. But then, across the street, in the dim light filtering from a distant lamppost, I saw it. A figure, barely discernible, standing absolutely still, facing my building. The figure held something up, and in the faint light, I saw the glint of a camera lens. It wasn't a digital threat anymore. It was real, physical. The air left my lungs in a gasp. I dropped the blind and scrambled backwards, collapsing against the wall. I called the police, my voice trembling, barely coherent. They came, they looked, they found nothing. They advised me to be careful, to increase security, but without concrete evidence, their hands were tied. The figure was gone by the time they arrived. The stalker never revealed their identity, never made any demands. They just watched and photographed and sent the evidence of their omnipresence. I eventually moved, leaving my small apartment behind, but the experience left an indelible mark. I became hyper-vigilant, constantly aware of my surroundings. My online presence became a ghost, meticulously anonymized and rarely updated. The deep web hadn't created the stalker, but it had provided the tools for their anonymity, allowing them to cross the digital divide into my physical world. I still don't know who observer_17 was or why they targeted me, but the chilling memory of receiving photos of myself taken in the privacy of my own home remains a constant reminder that the boundary between our online and offline lives is far more permeable and far more terrifying than we dare to imagine.